Welcome, everyone. Today, we are opening up a really fascinating, data-driven map of the American Midwest. We're going to look right past those standard historical narratives you might already know, and instead, we're going to explore the hidden history of this massive region through the lens of extraordinary yet largely unsung Italian-American contributions. We're talking about massive architectural achievements, life-saving heroics, and billion-dollar industrial turnarounds. It's an amazing story, so let's get right into it.
To really set the stage here, it's important to understand the incredible milestone that's driving this whole exploration. In 2026, We the Italians celebrates two anniversaries, One Heart, the 250th anniversary of the United States and the 80th anniversary of the Italian Republic. This explainer is part of the Happy Birthday USA Unsung Italian Heroes project, in which we share how, in every corner of the United States, an Italian has made a positive impact on their local community. This explainer is all about the Italian unsung heroes of the Midwest: Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Missouri, Michigan, Kansas, Minnesota, Montana, Nebraska, North Dakota, Ohio, South Dakota, Wisconsin, and Wyoming. Okay, let's dive into this. We've organized the remarkable legacies of 21 historical figures across four major themes: forging the early frontier, cultivating community and care, shaping arts and culture, and driving industry and service. Section 1. Forging the Early Frontier, Visionaries and Builders. The numbers behind these early figures are just staggering. In Minnesota, Giacomo Beltrame undertook an incredible, solitary expedition back in 1823, looking for the source of the Mississippi River while carrying a red umbrella for peace. He actually left us with two of the oldest surviving Native American wooden flutes in existence today. Down in Missouri, Bishop Giuseppe Rosati didn't just build the historic old cathedral in St. Louis, he helped recruit the Sisters of Charity, who established the very first hospital west of the Mississippi in 1828. Then you have Samuel Mazzucchelli in Wisconsin. This Dominican friar traveled 50,000 square miles on foot and by canoe in the freezing cold. He personally designed and built over 24 churches. And out in Montana, Father Antonio Ravalli, they called him the Leonardo of the Rockies, carved an 8-foot filigreed cross by hand. He was so deeply revered that in 1893, Ravalli County was literally named in his honor. But this foundational support wasn't just spiritual or architectural. It was deeply financial. $50,000? That is the staggering amount Francesco Vigo provided in personal loans to General George Rogers Clark during the American Revolution. Without his financial backing and critical intelligence, those breakthrough winter victories that secured Indiana might never have happened. Tragically, Vigo died in poverty at 88 before the loans were ever repaid. But 50 years later, the money finally came through, fulfilling a provision in his will. A massive 2-ton bell was installed in the Vigo County Courthouse, and it still tolls the hours to this day. And as the frontier modernized, well, so did the Italian ingenuity. Over in South Dakota's Black Hills, fragile timber railroad bridges were constantly collapsing. Luigi Carbonetti applied the ancient maritime woodworking techniques of Ligurian shipbuilders to create these flexible, interlocking joints. During a catastrophic flood in the early 1900s, his bracing system held firm, saving dozens of railroad workers' lives. Meanwhile, over in Wyoming, Johnny Rizzi completely revolutionized the 20th century's sheep industry. He took traditional Italian alpine pastoralism and designed semi-underground winter shelters. He proved that smart natural rotation could tame those freezing Wyoming blizzards. Section 2. Cultivating Community and Care, Guardians and Healers. These three individuals are the absolute definition of heroic. Up in North Dakota, midwife Mary D'Angelo braved sub-zero blizzards on rudimentary wagons or even on foot to deliver babies for isolated frontier women of all backgrounds. She saved hundreds of pioneer families and drastically lowered devastating infant mortality rates. In Kansas, Mary Palooka founded a deli in 1909 that became an absolute lifeline. During grueling coal miner strikes and economic downturns, she never let anyone go hungry, whether they could pay or not. But perhaps the most intense story of sacrifice belongs to Dominick Formento in Illinois. During the horrific 1909 cherry mine disaster, Formento and 11 other volunteers willingly took a fragile elevator cage down into a burning, toxic mine. They made 6 perilous trips, saving dozens of trapped men. On their 7th descent, the cage was engulfed in flames, and Formento, along with his brave crew, perished so that others might live. And this brilliantly illustrates how that spirit of guardianship evolved into a century of relentless civic advocacy. In 1926 Iowa, Mary J. Triglia took the helm of Sioux City's community house, transforming it into a beacon for immigrants. It was actually officially renamed in her honor during her lifetime in 1956. In 1967 Missouri, a quiet but relentless force named Rosalie Strata completely rebranded her declining neighborhood, successfully leading the vote to rename it Columbus Park. And in 1975 Ohio, Mary Zone turned personal tragedy into public triumph. After her husband suffered a fatal heart attack and waited an hour for an ambulance, Zone, who was a mother of 9 and the first Italian-American woman on the Cleveland City Council, championed the creation of the city's dedicated EMS service. Because of her relentless push, Cleveland EMS answered its very first call on October 13, 1975. Then there is Florence Scala in Illinois. 3,000. That's how many families were ultimately displaced when Chicago's Mayor Richard J. Daley pushed a massive expressway and university campus right through the city's Little Italy. But Florence Scala, a fearless woman of slight build, did not back down. She and 49 other women held a sit-in at the mayor's office. She survived 2 bomb blasts at her home meant to scare her off. She fought the city's highest form of bullying all the way to the Supreme Court. Now, although she ultimately lost the physical battle against the bulldozers, her 40-year fight preserved the spirit of that neighborhood. And in 2026, a museum bearing her name will proudly open on her beloved Taylor Street. Before we leave this theme, let's look at a fascinating dual legacy from the Caniglia family in Nebraska. Grazia Bonafede Caniglia represented social solidarity. She founded a 1925 festival that created a vital mutual aid network for isolated immigrants in Omaha. Meanwhile, Al Caniglia leveraged his Italian heritage for economic prosperity, building a network of highly successful restaurants that modernized Omaha's culinary profile and created widespread local employment. 2 sides of the same coin, profoundly changing the state. Moving on to Section 3. Shaping Arts and Culture, Transforming the Arts. If you've ever looked up at this stunning skyline of Detroit, Michigan, you have Corrado Parducci to thank. Arriving in 1924, this Tuscan immigrant brought the visual grammar of the Renaissance straight to the Motor City. He spectacularly decorated over 600 buildings. 600! From the geometric dynamism of the Art Deco Guardian Building to the majestic Fisher Building, Parducci literally gave a handcrafted soul of stone to the steel skeletons of American skyscrapers. Now, what's really interesting here is how these cultural contributions quickly scaled into massive milestones. In Colorado, Angelo Noce fought tireless campaigns against intense anti-Italian discrimination, leading to the state enacting the very first official Columbus Day in 1907, a holiday that spread to 14 states in just 5 years. Over in Ohio, Father Casto Marapisi launched the Columbus Italian Festival in 1980, focusing on faith, family, friends. Today, it draws an astounding 35,000 visitors annually. And back in Colorado, Lillian Covillo, who fell in love with dance at age 8 while looking through a snowy window, eventually co-produced her first ballet in 1951. She sewed the costumes and did the lighting herself, eventually establishing the renowned nonprofit Colorado Ballet in 1961. And hey, cultural impact isn't just art, it's sports too. Meet Margaret Gisolo. At just 13 years old, from a family of 6 in an Indiana coal mining town, she joined the local Boys American Legion junior baseball team. In 1928, she helped them capture the Indiana State Championship. She was so phenomenally talented she was dubbed the Girl Babe Ruth. Her success sparked a fierce national conversation about women in competitive sports that went all the way up to the Major League Baseball commissioner. She proved on a national stage that athletic excellence absolutely knows no gender. Let's move to our final section and see how this all builds together. Section 4. Driving Industry and Service. Massive change. So the crucial point is how this massive industrial change is perfectly captured in the numbers behind Lee Iacocca. The son of Italian immigrants, Iacocca rose through the ranks of Ford in Michigan to develop the Mustang, selling an unbelievable 418,812 cars in its first year alone in 1964. But his greatest legacy was saving Chrysler. Facing total financial collapse in 1978, which would have utterly devastated Michigan's economy, Iacocca convinced Congress to authorize a staggering $1.5 billion federal loan guarantee. Through sheer grit, brutal cost reductions, and innovative new vehicles like the K-Car and the modern minivan, he completely saved the company and repaid the loan in 1983, 7 years ahead of schedule. From Beltrami's solitary wilderness expedition, to Florence Scala's fearless defense of her neighborhood, to Lee Iacocca's billion-dollar industrial rescue, These 21 Italian Americans left a highly quantifiable, undeniable mark on the very fabric of the Midwest. They didn't wait for permission to build, to rescue, to create, or to lead. So, looking at their data-driven legacies, it leaves us with one provocative question. How will you take inspiration from these incredible stories and become an unsung hero in your local community today?